good day. This is Halloween, or in reality, this is October. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, for October, we're going to be taking a look at the urban fantasy genre of literature. Now, the urban fantasy genre has been around for a very long time. You had classic TV shows such as Kolchak the Night Stalker, even more classic shows such as The X-Files, and you have an entire body of literature with awesome books. What separates urban fantasy from horror is in urban fantasy, you got cool dudes in trench coats fighting back against the forces of the dark. And today, we're going to be taking a look at some of the very best books in that genre.
So let's get started. Monster Hunter International was written by Larry. I got a 3-story house on the mountain because of this book, Korea. This novel was originally published in 2007 and was marketed to gun nuts like myself. It is set in a world very similar to our own, but all the monsters exist. Werewolves? You got it. Lycans? You know it. Vampires? Blah blah blah. I want to suck your blood. Hope that's all they want to suck. We got Cthulhu's, Men in Black, all the good stuff. What keeps the world running is a masquerade that keeps all that stuff under wraps. Enter Owen, Zastava Pit, named after the Owen submachine gun, but for some reason Mr. Korea does not mention in the novel that he shares his middle name with the excellent Serbian firearms manufacturer. Mr. Pitt has to work late one day and gets attacked by his boss. His boss just so happens to be a werewolf. Pitt is a big-ass bastard and beats the shit out of the werewolf and then tosses said werewolf out the window. And then Mr. Pitt enters a larger, more scary world. There are so many monsters that the foul federal government of the United States contracts with private military companies, one of which is called Monster Hunter International. Pitt gets offered to join, and after a bit of training, Pitt gets doing just one thing: blasted monsters with a big-ass Saiga 12-gauge shotgun. This was Larry Korea's first novel, and he knocked it out of the park. Excellent pacing, great and fleshed-out characters, and fun gunplay can be found within. Just about everyone I have ever given this novel to loved it. Gramps loved it, my grandmother loved it, and funny enough, one day I was looking up other reviews of the book, and I found that Gun Jesus himself, Ian McCollum of the Clan McCollum, loved it. Monster Hunter International would spawn an entire series, and we will talk about the other entries in the series later. Next, you got Hard Magic, also by Larry Korea, released in 2012. This novel is set in an alternate 1930s where people can be born with magical powers, and as such, history is a little different. This novel is essentially Star Wars, but 1930s. You have a farm girl this time, and she has magical powers beyond what anyone else has, and you've got an empire. The Empire of Japan, that is, and that empire is poised to conquer the world. Can hard-boiled magical detective Jake Sullivan stem the tide? Oh, and late in the novel, we got a Death Star and an epic duel with katanas. This is actually, in my opinion at least, Larry Korea's best work. We got that Big Mama. We got World War Z, the ultimate zombie book, written by the son of comedy legend Mel Brooks, Max Brooks, and published in 2006. This novel is the definitive zombie book of all time. When zombies were just getting started around 08, I had already moved on because nothing could top what this book did. So, zombie apocalypse. Most writers have an even worse handle on logistics than the Wehrmacht did in World War II. They think that the world would be overwhelmed in an hour. Mr. Brooks understands that the apocalypse is hard. World War Z is called an oral history of the zombie war and features multiple perspectives of that war as things get worse and worse for humanity. Mr. Brooks said in an interview that this was also supposed to be a send-up of what the government would do if there ever was a pandemic. And just about everything that happens in this book, including the zombies, happened in 2020. It's quite scary just how much Maxie Boy got right. In World War Z, the zombie plague breaks out in China, oh dear, and spreads via air travel, oh dear. The governments of the world try and cover it up, oh dear. Lamestream media tries to discredit online sources and calls it misinformation, oh dear. And then when reality literally crashes through the front door for people, panic ensues, and the lamestream media continues to give outright lies and gets many people killed. As for the zombies, well, have you seen Portland? Oh dear. In any event, the writing itself is good, and the characters are great, and the whole thing feels very realistic. Too bloody realistic. If you have never read a zombie book, you know where to start. And let's get back to Mr. Korea. We got a crap ton of Monster Hunter books, and they're all pretty good, and I enjoyed them all for one read. The only problem is that Larry gets more cynical as time goes on, and they kind of move away from the fun and get too serious in places. However, if you're into that, you still might check them out. One of the big problems is that as the stakes get higher, the whole masquerade gets less plausible. Having the government police all of social media, I guess, works, but when you have dragons attacking Las Vegas, it's a little hard to believe. With that in mind, I do recommend checking out the second and third Monster Hunter novels. The second novel follows directly on from the first book and has Pitt go up against an evil necromancer, and later, an outer god from the Cthulhu mythos. I really like how Larry is able to show that Pitt is a good guy that has a legitimate anger problem, as Pitt does some boneheaded things that make a certain degree of sense if someone got angry enough and couldn't control their rage, and Pitt has to learn from his mistakes. Later on though, Pitt just gets a bit too boring for my tastes. Book 3, Monster Hunter Alpha, has a new viewpoint character, and this time we got a guy named Earl Harbinger. He is basically a Wolverine equivalent, and he has to fight an entire army of werewolves, and he is my favorite character in all of the Monster Hunter franchise. New characters would start showing up after this, but none ever really impressed me as much as Earl. Now on the subject of Zambettis, we got a book called Third Wave Idolan by John O'Brien. This is an interesting take on the zombie apocalypse. So get this, you have a coronal mass ejection hit the Earth at the same time that CERN is doing a particle experiment. This causes the quantum souls to be ripped out of almost all of humanity and sent to heaven. Okay, but some people become soul zombies with their souls half in and half out of their bodies. Okay, and the zombies can force a normal human soul to become half in and half out of their bodies, and somehow this allows the zombie soul to ascend to cosmic heaven. Best zombie plot ever. The writing is a little amateurish in places, but the characters are good enough, and just, man, that plot is really cool. It shows that imagination isn't dead. Next, we got Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. Evil mermaids! So, yeah, you got this reality TV show, Sit Back Down, and they send a boat to see if they can find real mermaids, and they find more than they bargained for. It's a nice creature feature, and the mermaids are super creepy. They are intelligent and speak via sign language. It's your typical horror plot with horror characters. Sadly, there has never been a follow-up despite a pretty open ending. Residue is the debut novel of Larry Correia's friend, Steve Diamond. I gave it a shot based upon that alone, and it's pretty good. Maybe you might like it more than me. In this urban fantasy world, a kid named Jack has the ability to see psychic residue from dead people. He has a girlfriend who is psychic, and right in the middle of this, you have an evil megacorp with genetically engineered werewolves. Mr. Diamond tries and succeeds in being clever, and has Jack written from the first person and the girl written from the third person, and this works remarkably well. I just didn't really care for the characters that much, and the ending is just too inconclusive. If you like stuff that is very close to being YA, you might give it a try. Moving away from YA, thank you, Esmira, we got Moran by YouTuber Seth Skorkowski. He is a YouTuber that reviews tabletop RPGs and loved Call of Cthulhu, and it shows. Now, I personally have only played D&D twice, so I love listening to him talk about tabletop RPGs. One day he talked about the 10th anniversary of his book, and I was like, book? He talked about how he wanted to have a protagonist fight monsters with a magic gun. From that premise alone, I was sold, and what I got was not quite what I expected. I thought it would be like Monster Hunter International, but instead it is very much a horror book. I think his fandom of Call of Cthulhu should have tipped me off. Demorian is a name of a magic gun that uses magical bullets, and you better keep track of those cartridge cases, cause they're magic too. In the world of Demorian, there are monsters, vampires, werewolves, rendigos, all that stuff. But they are all infused with the soul of a demon from hell. In a manner somewhat similar to Warhammer 40k, you cannot kill a demon via conventional means. You can destroy its meat body, but it will just seek out another meat body. In 40k, the soul of the demon will just go back to the warp and can return later. The only way to truly kill a demon is to give it a true death, and that is where Demorian comes in. If you shoot a foul demon with its magical bullet, you will destroy it permanently. In 40k, you can do that, but it's much harder Harder. The novel features the adventures of one Matt Hollis. His family was killed by Wendigos, but he was saved by a monster hunter. After the monster hunter dies, Hollis takes up the magical gun to Moran, and after a major league monster attack, a secret society seeks out Hollis's aid, but not all is as it seems. Seth really loves lurid descriptions of blood and death, and the world is pretty dark and humanity does not have too much hope to survive. If you love horror and love guns, you may in fact like this novel. And so those are my recommendations for urban fantasy. These books will give you some good imaginative plots, all with the backdrop of the craziness of modern day living. I am General Lotz, wishing you good World War Z and good third wave Idolan, or whatever makes you happy. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and please consider leaving a like or a comment, as the algorithm desires your soul. And I want to thank all those fans who have supported this channel, both past and present.